All right. Last time we finished talking, I said that we were going to go over the different offender typologies this next time, and so that's exactly what we will do. But let's see, get this off here. So, three major types that we are going to discuss are going to be your power assurance rapist, anger retaliation, and then sadistic rapists. So keep those are the three. If I ask you and I have quiz or test question, anything like that, and I ask you about the different uh, rapist types, these are the three that we'll be looking at. And those are the ones you should be choosing from. So sometimes, if I'm going to talk about the power reassurance rapists first, so um, sometimes they're referred to as compensatory rapists. They tend to be the least violent, least aggressive type because they are, as the name would suggest, power reassurance. They're just simply trying to reassure themselves of some quality, some aspect, that they are competent. Okay, um, they tend to have low self-esteem, and they are usually, have feelings of inadequacy. So I'm going to put some of these up here. So, whoops, sorry about that. So what we're talking about with this is, as you can see, less aggressive. We'll get to that in a second. Compensates for inadequacies through sexuality, meaning, once again, the sex or the rape itself is simply a tool or a weapon of choice in essence. So if this person lacks in uh, confidence with females, whether going back to the heterosocial issues or deficiencies, if it is inadequacies in the work that they do, meaning they either are unemployed, uh, underemployed, or have a job that they is menial and doesn't really uh, doesn't really bode any type of I guess if you want to say uh, level of respect or people don't give it honor or anything like that. That's what we're talking about. These are menial jobs that uh, don't allow that person to feel confident about themselves. That's one thing. Going back to that less aggressive aspect of it, they tend to be the type who, if a sexual, if it occurs, like say if they rape someone, um, whether it be through true intercourse or whatever the case may be, oral or anything sexual along those lines. Like we said, rape covers a large spectrum with a new definition of it. These are the type that will try to make it seem like it is, in their mind, make it seem a little bit more consensual, make it, they may uh, have that person undress themselves, and when they're done, put the clothes back on and try to, they are not looking to be violent. They're not looking to completely dominate someone. They are just there to reassure themselves that they can still um, function. They can, in terms of both sexually, but also have someone, feel confident in some form or fashion when they are lacking in all other areas of their life. Like we said here, it can be premeditated. They can plan something out, try to set up something to where get somebody alone with them. Could also be something that is unplanned. We'll get to that shortly, but a lot of these people, roughly, it's just under 90% of them, actually come from homes where you know there's one of the parents were not there. Also, they had problems in school, or could be academic problems, could be behavioral problems, and excuse me, they tend to be more passive people. This is like, if you had to compare this to one of the category types that we talked about, offenders for for like serial murder or for serial anything, like serial crimes, this power reassurance falls more so under disorganized, asocial. Okay, same personality we talked about that is going to show up here with power reassurance. Mothers, the one big difference I'd say between the power reassurance rapist and some of the other categories we looked at with disorganized asocial offenders is we didn't really talk about it much with the disorganized asocial offenders, but we will talk about it with power reassurance. A lot of times they had mothers who were, if you want to call it, dominating, or aggressive towards them, and even in some cases they could have been seductive. So like basically forcing the child, into sexual, situations, thoughts, or like I said, having situations, meaning having the child help in some type of sexual way, whether it be, um, being forced to become a uh, being forced to receive oral sex or perform oral sex. That's something that some of the mothers of these individuals, will have done. So, um, see anything else I can think of about. Oh, they also tend to this type, um, of the different types we're going to talk about. This is the type. If there's any type of, uh, transvestism, that takes place, this would be the one. Meaning they sometimes they'll dress up. They'll do. Uh, they will dabble in being a transvestite. Sometimes they will, whenever they're on their own and choose to, masturbate or whatever, they may dress up in, female clothing and things like that. Uh, Voyeurism, fetishism, things like that. Uh, and going back to this compensation for inadequacies through sexuality, this group here, because they lack so much confidence, um, and their personalities, you'll find out that they tend to be, excessive masturbators. So, because there's no other outlet for them, so they, in their mind, I guess that's how they deal with it. And I don't always mean a sexual outlet, but there's no other way for them to feel adequate in their own mind. So, that's something else to be aware of. Um, they tend to pick people from their own age category, their own race, um, and they tend to commit their rapes at night. So remember, I said sometimes time of day matters. Well, this is, usually it's going to be like, say, uh, midnight to early morning, so 4 or 5, something along those lines. Let's see if I put any of this other information on here. I didn't, but I can tell you though that, one thing to be aware of. Apologize for not having this on the slide, but do write this down if you're writing things. Um, the offender tends to take somewhere between 1 to 2 weeks between, rape. So 7 to 14 days is typical. Like I said, excessive masturbation, but they're also, if they can, they're trying to, or either try to or have a situation for opportunistic rape that takes place once every basically 1 to 2 weeks. Um, even though there's little violence, it can increase throughout the attack itself. Um, and also, um, will they oftentimes use weapons because they don't feel like they're adequate enough to do it without weapons. So in this particular person's case, I say person, but this type of person, will typically pick, say a knife, maybe a gun occasionally, but more so a knife, not because they're ever going to really use it on someone, but that's just a simple weapon that they can use, to coerce someone, into doing what they want them to do. Um, Sometimes this is the one that, will also do some of your, I call it role playing or script reading. In essence, remember early in the semester, it's not semester, but early part of this lesson, we talked about profiling violent crimes. I talked about the guy who would go into the house and, would rape women, and the one that got caught because he went back, to the same house. But he asked if he was better than her husband. He would ask that on a regular basis with all his victims. Um, that's something else that these power reassurance people do. They they go through and they say, hey, am I better than am I better your husband or your boyfriend or whatever the case may be? And they typically have some type of diary to talk about their rapes, so they can go back and kind of relive them in between their rape sessions, if you want to call them that. And trying to think anything else here that you need to be aware of as far as power reassurance is concerned. Okay. I do want to point out, if you ever have to interview one of these people, I suggest that you do it in the evening time. And it's best to try to empathize with these people if you can. If going back to the whole, like, those of you who've been reading your Mindhunter book, even though it was a case of murder, the Mary Frances Stoner case, where DeVere was the guy's last name, whenever the best way to get to him, besides the whole setup of how when they're questioning how that room was set up and things like that, one of the other ways they got to him was simply by kind of playing along and empathizing. Oh, I can see, I'm sure she probably, in essence, led you on, and I'm sure that, hey, anymore these girls, look kind of, these old girls look like women, and I'm sure that she was being friendly and kind of leading you into the idea of thinking that she wanted something sexual. So that's another way, like I said, empathizing with them. And then you can also be that role of, oh, you can tell me, you can trust me, I listen, or will listen to you, things like that. So that's what we're talking about with your power reassurance type. I hope that's been helpful. And yes, I'm going to cut off early because I know that by the time I get into any details of the anger retaliation rapist, which is next, there's going to be too much to try to finish up in the time that we have remaining, if we're trying to keep all these around 15 minutes. So that being said, like I said, power reassurance, just go back over the things we talked about. If I had to pick a major category of disorganized or organized, whatever, we're looking at more so very similar to the very similar to the disorganized asocial offender. But power reassurance, just think about things I've told you about, things that we'd be looking for. If it's a situation of going back to opportunistic rather than premeditated, so once again, these people are probably going to be raping individuals who are in that same area of nearby in their own neighborhood, close to the work, or their routes on work, like where they work, who they work for, the routes there, or just, geographical area that's nearby. So keep that in mind. Opportunistic would factor into the idea of they didn't plan it out, but they happen to see someone who is vulnerable based on physical features, based on other situations that happen to present themselves without them really being in that, if you want to call it, mood or situation to where they're looking for a victim. That's what we're talking about with opportunistic type of situations, to where that, or if they're feeling somewhat bad about themselves, whatever, they may go do that. But it's usually just a particular opportunity they may have that presents themselves they weren't planning on. So that being said, I will cut this off, and I will be talking to you guys soon about the anger retaliation. Have a good one.